welcome to the Winden Caves. I'm Bubba, and joining me is...
Tiny!
Tiny, today we're going to be covering the next 3 episodes in the German TV show from Neflix, Dark. We're going to be talking about the 3rd episode, Past and Present, the 4th, Double Lives, and the 5th episode, Truths. I am doing this as a rewatch to get ready for Season 2. Tiny, how about you?
I am watching Dark for the very first time.
Exciting. Now, Tiny, Season 2 premieres on June 21st, 2019. Do you remember what happened on June 21st of 2019?
That's the day that Mikkel, a.k.a. Mikkel, committed suicide. The way we started out the show.
Right. So isn't this great? Netflix is premiering Season 2 of the show on the day that Season 1 takes place. Everything's a circle. Time is a flat circle. Tiny, in a bit, we're going to get to our discussion where you'll be giving your insights after only seeing the first 5 episodes. But because Dark has time travel, we like to introduce a bit of time travel into the podcast. The Tiny who's recording this intro has seen up to episode 8. Is there any future knowledge you'd like to pass on to your earlier self now that you've seen 3 more episodes of Dark?
Previous Tiny, do not get comfortable. Just when you think you have things figured out, things may change again.
That is great advice. Before we get into today's main discussion, and then after that our spoiler section, let's get to some great listener feedback we've had so far. Remember, you can give us feedback at any time at PHQ. That's the word double, the single letter P, and the letters HQ for headquarters. At PHQ on Twitter and Instagram, Facebook.com/PHQ. So let's get to that feedback. Tiny, our first bit came from Stephen Jenkins, who's at Stephen L. Jenkins on Twitter. They wrote, "So glad you guys are doing this show. The first season was so good."
All right, our next feedback is from Eileen Will, all the way from, get this, Germany. How authentic is our podcast?
All right.
Hi there from Germany. Hi, Eileen. Loved your first episode. I'm a rewatcher. Loved your discussion and about the hotel. So funny. Looking forward to more episode. And then there's a German word that I cannot pronounce. Thanks, Eileen.
Thanks, Eileen. Danke schön, Eileen. Down in Australia, our good Double L loyal listener, Peter, who's at Baga2007 on Twitter. Peter wrote, "We are going to start watching Series 1 again. It's been so long since it was on. Hopefully we'll get through the whole thing before Season 2 starts." That's great to hear, Peter.
Oh, we also heard from Amy at Amy Home Alone. This is still on my list. Amy, if you're home alone, what else have you got going on?
Our final bit of feedback is from another great Double L, Endless Mike, who's at EndlessMike03 on Twitter. He wrote, "That show is das good. Do you do dubs or subtitles?" So I'll say that this is my rewatch. My first time through, I did subtitles. I normally love to hear the natural people speaking and then read it. But even as I was watching it, it became especially difficult because you've got to concentrate on those words so much. So this time, Tiny, we're doing dubs. How do you feel the dubs are going?
I usually enjoy subtitles too, but I actually like the dubbed version. I kind of forget that we're even watching a dubbed version. It's totally fine.
Now, we do have to mention Cousin Jack. Cousin Jack came through. And Tiny, do you want to tell our listeners about Tiny Jack's impression from us watching the dubbed version?
Jack was very concerned that the actors were a little bit shoddy for the show. He said, "Hey, they're not even lining up their words with their mouths." He missed a little bit of the point.
Yeah, he didn't realize we were watching a dubbed show, and he went, "Man, these actors are terrible."
Typical Jack.
All right, listeners, now we're going to jump in and we're going to discuss the first 5 episodes of Season 1 of Dark in their entirety. If you haven't watched up to Season 5, jump out now and pause the podcast, go catch up, and then come back to us. Otherwise, join us deeper in the Winden Caves. Okay, we are moving forward deeper into the caves. We've now watched 5 episodes. If you do not want spoilers, if you've not seen Dark up through episode 5, stop the podcast now, watch those episodes, and then come back. Tiny, we're up to episode 5, halfway through this very twisty and turny season. What are your initial impressions on these next 3 episodes, episode 3, episode 4, and episode 5?
Well, I tell you, Bubba, when I was watching it,
I wasn't necessarily into episode 3.
That was the episode where it was entirely set in 1986, 33 years ago from the present timeline, where Mikkel comes out into this foreign world.
Now that I'm a little bit further ahead, I can see that episode was teeing things up. But at the time, it was a little bit frustrating just to keep up with who was who in 1986 and who was who that we learned from episodes 1 and 2. So there was just a lot to keep track of. But again, now that I'm a little further ahead, I can understand the point of it.
Well, there is no time to bury the lead. Episode 5 gives away the game. Mikkel, a.k.a. Michael, is Jonas's dad. Tell me about how you realized this twist was coming, how you feel now that you know about his tragic fate that began the series.
Mind blown. I guess I figured it out. Maybe I'm late to the party, but I figured it out when Michael's mother was walking down the hall as a nurse, talking about how she didn't want him to go to a youth home. It's crazy interesting to me that Mikkel basically gets stuck in 1986 to become grown. But I tell you what, Mikkel might have the best scenario. When I think about poor Eric being dragged through the woods, his body being dragged, I'm wondering why Mikkel at least got to have a shot at life. But I guess I don't know when Eric's body was being dragged through the woods, so who knows?
Great point. Eric, the red-haired missing kid from the beginning of the series, we saw him in that blue wallpapered room listening to that crazy music. We saw his body being dragged through the woods. He has seemingly had a sad fate, but in some ways so is Mikkel. I was watching your face, Tiny, as you very subtly out of the corner of my eye, when you began to realize Mikkel's fate, and you turned to me and I just gave a little nod, because it's like, oh yes, isn't it? In some ways, it's tragic. And why do I consider it tragic? Not just that the poor Michael/Mikkel commits suicide, but possibly before he commits suicide, his wife starts having an affair with his dad, who she seemingly had a crush on her whole life. Oh,
Bubba, just because you cut out pictures and post them in a scrapbook doesn't mean that you're absolutely obsessed with somebody. Sometimes it's normal to call somebody 32 times in a row.
Well, let's get to Jonas's mom, Hannah. In episode 3, we saw her as a little girl, and I thought, oh, this cute little girl. And here in episode 5, she turns out to have been an Ulrich-obsessed young girl. And in some ways, is she becoming one of the villains of the show? In our present timeline, if I can even say it, of 2019, she's unwilling to give up this affair with Ulrich, even though obviously with his son missing, he's gone slightly insane and he can't deal with an affair. And back in 1986, she seemingly, knowingly accuses Ulrich of rape, even though it wasn't rape.
I guess that's where this is where I want to keep watching, and that I want to understand all of the relationships. So Mikkel/Michael, when he was growing up, I mean, Winden is not that big, so you have to assume that while his parents were in high school and he was in elementary school, you probably knew who everyone was when he was growing up. So I'm trying to figure out just the timeline on everything. It's kind of like, I guess, Back to the Future 3. Does he ever watch himself
as a little kid?
Little kid.
Oh, I feel terrible for Mikkel. In some ways, I feel terrible for everybody. Everybody's going through. Just sticking with the Hannah is obsessed with Ulrich.
Yeah, do you feel bad for Hannah?
In some ways, yes, she shouldn't have done what she did. But in some ways, I feel bad for her in that if you had a crush on somebody and you thought they liked you back from the way Ulrich was being very friendly with her back in 1986. But it's tough to feel sorry for her completely. How about the hilarious bit of irony that Ulrich's wife back in 1986, Katharina, she kept saying, no kids. Ulrich, we're in high school, we can get busy, but we can't have kids. Of course, she's going to later grow up to be a high school principal and have 3 children of her own.
No AIDS either. She didn't want AIDS from Ulrich.
Well, so far we knew he failed on 50% of that request.
Right, there you go. So the other thing, and I don't know if it was in episode 3 or episode 4, but the other thing I've made an assumption on, and maybe it's true, maybe it's not, we don't know, but the body found, I guess, in episode 2, I'm assuming is maybe Ulrich's brother.
The brother who went missing in 1986. There was a body found, that's exactly right, in the present day of 2019, who had a Walkman. This boy was found with a kind of burnt out eyes. Yeah, I think it might be safe to assume that that's Ulrich's brother who went missing all those years ago, whose disappearance inspired Ulrich to become the cop he is in present day.
The only challenge with that I'm thinking about is, why does Mikkel get older and grow up in 1986 and the brother, I guess, was frozen in time?
Yes, we are going to have to find that out. So I know it wasn't your favorite. On a rewatch, I have to be honest, it wasn't my favorite either. But let's talk real briefly about all the things we learned in 1986. And I think the reason why that episode's so tough is we have just come to know everybody in 2019 and care about their problems and scenarios. When we're suddenly introduced to an entirely new cast, even if some of them are younger versions of characters we already knew, it's still connecting with this new actor as opposed to the old actor, as well as all these other characters who we suddenly had to meet. Let's get to one of them. In 1986, we have Egon Tiedemann. He's the police officer who is being attacked by Ulrich, who seems to have a problem with Ulrich. He's also got a problem with sheep that he's dealing with. Who is Egon Tiedemann? Well, he's Claudia Tiedemann's, a.k.a. Regina's grandfather. So Regina runs the hotel. Her mom in 1986 has just been promoted to a director there at the nuclear power plant. And now her grandfather is a police officer who is trying to solve this missing case. He has trouble with young Ulrich, who's attacking him because he's always missing this stuff. And of course, as a police officer, that's where Mikkel ends up as this lost child. We have the issue, let's stick with Claudia, who has the issue of the power plant, where when she gets to be in charge of the power plant, she's having an affair. Who is she having an affair with, Tiny?
I don't know. Can't keep up. Who was it? It's the reporter, I know, but I was trying to connect the dots to 2019. Who was the reporter in 2019?
Well, yeah, I got to figure that out myself. This is so confusing.
I think you're only supposed to ask questions to the things you know, Bubba.
Never. No, it's completely confusing. So hold on, let me see if I can find out here. Okay, no, they don't list him as a reporter. Hold on. He's somebody's fan. All right, hold on. Yeah, no, oh boy, this is so confusing. All right, edit. Or leave this in to show how absolutely, positively confusing
We seem perfect without the edits, so why not leave them in to give people a little bit of flavor?
Well, all right. So the hotel manager, Regina, in 2019, her mom becomes nuclear power plant director. Let's forget the fact that she's fooling around. But let's instead go to the problem at the nuclear power plant. She's like, hey, what's going on with these books? What's going on with these books? She is brought out to seemingly some caves next to the nuclear power plant where there's, you're right, suddenly a door and lots of what looks like nuclear waste.
Where else are you going to put it?
In the Winden Caves,
right.
Course.
Yes.
Obviously, not good. Not good. Is 86, and here's another question I don't know, is 86, is it possible this is tied to Chernobyl?
I think you have to put yourself in 1986. I mean, people thought about nuclear war a lot in 1986. So, maybe they were storing them for, some future battle against the Russians or something like that.
Yeah. I thought it was just nuclear waste, and they're like, where are we going to put it? Let's just throw it down in the cave. So there's certainly trouble there. You might assume that's going to come back. Let's assume that's going to come back. At the nuclear power plant, who's there but a character named Helga Doppler? Now, who in the world is Helga Doppler? Let's see if I can keep this straight. So in 2019, there's the old man who has the burned ear, right? He came out and said, it's happening again. It's happening again. In 86, we see that he works as a guard or some blue-collar job at the nuclear power plant, and there he still has that burnt ear and that kind of scarring on his face. Who is Helga Doppler? Helga Doppler is the psychologist's father. Okay, so the psychologist, who we learned in episode 4, married to the female cop.
Right.
Has the 2 daughters. He has Francesca, who who had the marijuana she took stolen by Bartos, and the youngest daughter, who's deaf. And so his father was a power plant at this guard. The psychiatrist in 2019, he seems to be married with children, but possibly homosexual, and he's got that issue going on. He has very specific or suspicious behavior, which kind of ties to episode 4. Episode 4 was really about the Doppler family. That is the female cop, Charlotte, her husband, Peter, who's the therapist seeing Jonah, but also certainly has lots of issues going on, who definitely wasn't at home the night Mikkel disappeared. Once again, their daughter, Francesca, who seems to have something going on with good old Magnus Nielsen, and, of course, the youngest deaf daughter, Elizabeth. And episode 4 is about that family, and I feel like we had to spend time with them. But of the 4 families, I'm going to say the Doppler family might be so far the one I'm the least interested in. Tiny, when we were talking about those first 2 episodes, you felt that Jonas was the only character who you're like, I don't want bad things to happen to Jonas. I don't want bad things to happen to Jonas. Do you still feel like Jonas is your number one, or are there other characters who've come into the mix?
Strangely, I really feel connected to Ulrich right now. So, I mean, just the breaking the law to try to save his son.
He snuck into that nuclear power plant, got beat up. He's still got the scars here in episode 5.
Yeah, and he obviously is conflicted about having the affair. But, I mean, he's a hero. He's a hero. He's a bad boy turned cop, turned dedicated father. So I think he's got a redemption coming.
Trying to keep things straight again, let's get to the kind of teenage soap opera romance that's happening in 2019. Not the teenage romance that's happening between Ulrich and his future wife, Katharina, the principal, in 1986. But back in 2019, we've got Jonas. Once again, I almost want to call him our main protagonist, even though there's so many of us. He, the summer before his dad committed suicide, obviously had some sort of relationship with Martha Nielsen, Ulrich's daughter. He goes into therapy. He's out of it. Martha starts dating his best friend, Bartos. Bartos in this episode's like, hey, Jonas, episode 5, I should say, is like, hey, Jonas, come with me. I've met this drug dealer, Eric's drug dealer, who he assumes is Eric's drug dealer. We'll get to that story in a minute.
Who happens to know his name when he calls him.
Right. Isn't it a bit suspicious, tingling alert, that this is a phone found in Eric's drugs? Rather than turn that over to the police, Bartos, which I kept screaming at the screen, he keeps it, tries to unlock the code, then somebody calls, he answers, and the person calling him knows who he is.
Just meet me in the woods in the dark.
Tiny, do we need to do some public service announcements for the town of Winden?
Hello, everyone. It's me, McGruff, the crime dog. I've been invited across America to help people fight crime, and now I'm going to Europe, to the great country of Germany, to help them fight their crime. I'm here on the radio. Call me right now, 1-800-McGruff, and I'll answer your questions. We have a caller right now on the line. Let's hear it.
Yeah, hello, McGruff. There have been some children recently disappearing from our town, possibly kidnapped. My question is, I don't have time to pick up my deaf daughter from her school. It's perfectly fine if she walks through the spooky Winden forest all by herself, correct? I'll hang up and listen to your answer.
Oh, what's going on? Of course you can't let your daughter just walk through the woods when people aren't getting them. Come on, that's ridiculous. Next caller.
Yeah, McGruff, I have a similar question, but instead of a 13-year-old girl who's deaf, I have a 13-year-old boy. That's perfectly fine to allow them to walk through the woods unsupervised, right?
What is wrong with these callers? You've got to pick up your children when people go missing. This is McGruff, the crime dog, and you can't just let your children go walking Germany. What's going on? Let's go to the next caller.
Hi, this is Alexander. I work at the nuclear power plant. If I have nuclear waste buried in a cave, but the police are going to come looking and investigate my nuclear power plant when looking for a missing child, where should I hide the nuclear waste?
That has nothing to do with crime. I'm a crime dog. Next caller.
Hi, yes, McGruff, long-time listener, first-time caller. I have a very awkward situation. My father is my girlfriend's brother. She's my aunt.
Do you have a question?
No, just help me.
Hang up on all of them. All right, listen, Germany. I've come here, McGruff the crime dog, and I've got one message for you. You gotta take a bite out of time. Get it? Instead of bite out of crime, take a bite out of... Hello?
I mean, what is the poor deaf boy's name who's missing now?
Well, okay, let's see if we could get that up. There was definitely a Y in there. What was the young boy's name? Oh, but isn't that tragic?
Talk about sympathetic characters. I mean, you get to know him for 2 minutes and then he's gone.
Well, Elizabeth Doppler is the young deaf child of the female cop, Charlotte, and the psychologist, Peter. She, once again, was a character we kind of didn't even talk about when we talked about the first 2 episodes. She stole her older sister Francisca's lipstick. Why? Because she has a boyfriend. You're right, this young other child who's...
Tavin, maybe?
It's too hard. And I'm looking on the Wikipedia, and this boy is not even listed on any of the main pages. Oh, wait, he's got to be listed here. Hold on. Yasin, exactly right. Yasin is the deaf boy. Now, this deaf girl, boy, this is also tied together. But let's go back to the romance.
The romance.
Let's go back to the romance.
The big revelation
What's
is that Jonas is in love with his aunt.
That's right, Martha. His crush is who? The sister of his father, Michael Mikkel. He's in love with his aunt. Is that going to put a damper on their attempt to get back together? Or will the fact that she's technically still in a relationship with his best friend Bartos put a damper on the relationship? How do you feel about this young triangle we have in 2019?
Well, I mean, I feel sorry for Jonas. It seems like his love life is turning around, and then he gets a mysterious note from his deceased father informing him that his love interest is his aunt. I mean, that's got to be another blow.
You know what? It's just a hurdle.
You think he's just going to still go for it?
Well, he loves her. This we're going to have to see over these final 5 episodes.
There's a lot of different kinds of love. So
Aunt love?
Aunt love.
Yes, we have this romance going on. Why is Martha trying to get back? I mean, this was a question Jonas put to her. He's like, well, why did you call me this morning instead of Bartos? Why did you message me instead of your boyfriend? Do you think it's just she can't resist your first love? What do you think's going on there?
I think tragedy brings people together. She's lost her brother. He's lost his dad. I think she probably thinks that Jonas understands better, and you know what? It appears that he does. Bartos seems a little bit checked out on everything going on in Wyndham right now, so...
All right, so let's follow Bartos' story if you can. Listeners, write to us at PHQ on Twitter and Instagram. Go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/PHQ. That's the word double, the single letter P, the letters HQ for headquarters. We here at Double P Media love hearing you. We want to understand if you can follow this along better than we can. So let's get back to good old Bartos. So he goes out, he takes this bag of drugs, which remember was actually, now that I think about it, in Francesca's hand. He takes it. He smokes some of the pot. In there's a phone. In the phone, he gets this call from somebody who knows his name and knows who he would answer it. Who is that person who says, meet him? It's this brand new character called Noah. That should pick up our ears. Why? Because back in episode 4, it ended with, okay, the young deaf child of the female cop and the psychiatrist, Elizabeth, comes back. And she's like, hey, Mom, I'm okay. I met this person in the woods called Noah, and he gave me this old...
Stopwatch?
Yeah, like a stopwatch or a pocket watch almost, which is inscribed for Charlotte, her mom, on the inside of it. Then we see that this boy, Yasin, the deaf boy, he goes into the woods, and somebody says, I'd like to introduce you to Noah. Get to episode 5. We first see Noah back in 1986 talking to who? Mikkel. He's been a priest brought in to talk to this boy who's been found and doesn't have any parents, doesn't have anything. Then we see him next in the car, encouraging Bartos to get in 2019. What's important, this is our first character who looks identical in both timelines. He looks identical in 1986 as he does in 2019. what are your initial impressions or thoughts about the priest, Noah?
Well, look, if I saw Noah, I would totally steer clear. I did think that the deaf girl did a great spot-on sketch of Noah. I don't know why they've got Eric's poster everywhere around town, but they've got no posters up saying, watch out for Noah, with his picture, which is totally spot on. It looks better than Eric's picture missing. Noah's picture is spot on. So, I think he's definitely too mysterious. I think it's obvious he's the bad guy. And what's interesting is I'm starting to think the guy with the hood is the good guy.
So let's talk about him. In the cast, he's referred to as the Stranger. So the Stranger, let's talk about the things he's recently done over the last couple episodes. So remember, he came out of the cave wearing a black hoodie. I always go back to Magnus was always like, hey, where's my black hoodie? But he comes out of the cave wearing a black hoodie. Those Winden Caves. He checks into Regina's hotel, which is really having trouble. In episode 5, people are canceling, and they want their money back for canceling. And he goes to that hotel, and he starts putting up his FBI profiler wall.
That's right, yeah.
He is the one who wrote, "When is Mikkel?" But the next couple of things we see him do, very interesting. And I'm not sure these are even in order of they happen on the show, but these are some of the things I remember. I know we see him outside the caves when Jonas goes in to explore the caves. So I know we saw him then. I know also in that same episode, episode 4, theoretically, he breaks into Jonas's room, goes to that map of the caves, and looks at them. Jonas had put them in his desk drawer, and this mysterious stranger comes out and looks at them. Here in episode 5, I'll probably forget something. He's working on some giant clock kind of machine that looks like it can go in a suitcase. He comes downstairs and he hands a package to Regina, the hotel manager, who's once again Bartos' mom, and he says, hey, I need you to deliver this. It's very important. It has to be delivered tonight. Then we see the package is going to Jonas, but then for whatever reason, he ends up at the graveyard where Mikkel/Michael's grave is, and he talks to Jonas. And what did you think of that talk? Was it just live for the day? What was the
Live for the day. He also told Jonas he knew his dad well, and that his dad saved his life in a way. Something to that effect. So that was really interesting. I don't know. I see a twist coming on with him that maybe he's not, maybe he looks spooky, but maybe he's not all bad.
Interesting.
A man of few words, maybe misjudged a little bit.
Let's say that the package that he sends to Jonas, we later see, seems to be this kind of handhold ball flashlight. And then also, is it a Geiger counter? What was the other thing in that?
I have no idea.
But then also, and here's where we're really going off the reservation, the third thing in this box delivered to Jonas is his dad's note, his dad's suicide note that can't be opened till November 4th, the day Mikkel disappeared. Now, if I'm tracking the suicide note, as far as I know, Michael/Mikkel left it after he committed suicide. Then theoretically his mom, Ines, the nurse, who in the future is, I assume, just, a retired nurse, reading it in the early episodes, now it ends up in this stranger's package that he sends to Jonas. And it's his father telling the story of, hey, when you lost, that boy you lost is me. I went back in time, and I am Mikkel. Woogity, oggity, oggity. There obviously are twists going. If you're Jonas, do you believe this note? It sounds ridiculous.
So what do you think the urgency was for it to be delivered that night?
Well, it's possible that he saw Jonas getting busy with Martha.
Well, that's exactly what I was thinking.
Thought, I better give him this note to let him know Martha's his aunt so he doesn't do anything he'll regret. But it can't just be that. I mean, it's got to be something.
This is just where I struggle with the story, because surely adult Mikkel knew this old family. I guess he couldn't approach them because it would have sounded crazy.
But how could he? Say you're Michael in 2005. Your dad and mom are right there across town. Not only that, your brother and sister are right there.
Right, yeah, it's crazy. I don't know. As an adult, I might just, you've already had one fresh start. Why don't you just move to a different town in Germany at that point?
I'm saying, but he could see himself. He could go see his younger self and tell his younger self things.
Right.
A question I asked you, Tiny, was about Hannah. Let's go back. Jonas's mom, the massage therapist who's been obsessed with Ulrich her whole life. She met Mikkel when he was 13. She later goes and obviously I'm going to assume fell in love. They had a child named Jonas. All's going well. And then suddenly, at some function, you're like, it's a small town, you would have seen Mikkel Nielsen. Do you ever think to yourself, boy, he looks a lot like my husband when I met him all those years ago? Or 33 years later, are you not going to notice that similarity?
I think it's such a jump to know. I mean, I could know somebody from work and I see them at Kroger and I have no idea who they are. They might look slightly familiar, but when you see somebody out of context, it's just really difficult. So I think even add the out of context plus 33 years and there's no way.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think it makes sense, but is it possible this is why we haven't learned yet why Michael committed suicide? Is it that he couldn't live two lives? Is it because somehow he remembered that story from when he was a child that, oh yeah, Jonas is your sister and older brother Magnus's friend Jonas's dad commits suicide around this time? Is it because perhaps the affair between Hannah and Ulrich started while he was still alive and suddenly he's freaking out because his dad, who's just a few years older than him now in this crazy timeline, is having an affair with his wife? Poor Michael Mikkel's story is a tragedy and it's twisty.
I mean, I think there's two questions that I have. One is, what is the riff between Michael's wife and his mom?
Oh, great question.
It seems like his mom, took in what she thought was an orphan. She seems nice enough, so I wonder what the crime is there between the two of them. It seems more on his wife's side with the torn up picture, with the mom torn out of the picture. So that's my question number one. And my question number two is, how much faith do you have in people to say do not open until November 4th, 10:13 p.m.? I mean, if I were Michael Mikkel, I might just wait 9 months to commit suicide until after that time instead of writing the note. I think it's a big ask to tell people who would have had no idea not to open your suicide letter for 6 to 9 months.
Well, how about this? Mikkel, I'm not sure he knows what happened to him, but he knows that on this night, November 4th, he was taken back in time. Is there any way he could have stayed alive and tried to prevent it? But that would mean that would that destroy his existence in a different state?
Well, he wouldn't have a son, so I think that's probably the reason he would have let it happen. Because, if you have your son, then you're not going to have kind of another time reference movie, but a little bit of Peggy Sue Got Married in here.
So, real quickly, spoilers for Peggy Sue Got Married. For our listeners who haven't seen that movie, give them the quick what if there.
Peggy Sue Got Married. She goes to her high school reunion where she's going to see her ex-husband. And she wishes that she had not had sex with him on prom night, or I guess on graduation, because her life would have been entirely different. And she kind of has I love that movie, actually. It's a long time ago. I think it's a Penny Marshall movie or something like that. But she passes out at the reunion and goes back in time and has the opportunity to relive events and fall in love with her high school boyfriend and get pregnant again on prom night. And despite wishing her whole life that she had not done that, she makes the same exact choice.
Oh,
sorry for anybody who was going to watch Peggy Sue Got Married.
Well,
weekend.
we've also been spoiling Back to the Future.
Yeah.
Marty desperately needs his parents to get back together, or he won't exist.
Basically, all the movies from 1986 are free game.
All right. Well, we're only halfway through. If listeners, you've been able to follow along with this, I tip my cap to you. When I first watched this series, I think back in January of 2018. I would tweet out things, and what I would say in my tweets is, normally I would write the word spoiler, but this is so confusing that if you don't know, none of this will make sense. Listeners, if you've been able to follow us on this journey, follow the show for these 5 episodes, write to us on PHQ, at PHQ on Twitter and Instagram. We want to know who are your favorite characters. Who do you like? Who do you hate? And let's get to it. So I keep asking you who you like. You right now are really connecting with Ulrich. Who are the people you dislike? You asked me about Hannah. How you feeling about Noah, Hannah, Bartos, Regina, the hotel manager? Who are your...
I do think that family, Charlotte's family, is probably the least that you can connect with. I mean,
that's the female cop, the psychiatrist, and her 2 daughters.
Yeah, I mean, she's got a history of finding dead birds. That's kind of... But I really don't know much else about her. She was pretty rough with her daughter on the interrogation. And then, of course, her husband just seems like a basket case where you don't really know, it seems like he could be intimately involved, or it seems that he could have like some other secret that's totally unrelated, and either one is completely feasible.
All right. You didn't touch on Noah. You said he's a bad dude. Any wild predictions about the stranger, Noah, the love affairs, Jonas's realization of his lust for his aunt? Any predictions for these final 5, Tiny?
Noah and the stranger, we just don't know a lot about them other than their actions. We really don't know what motivates them, what they care about. So it's really hard to give a lot of commentary on them. I think Jonas, a little bit of Achilles here, leaving Bartos out to dry to meet the, quote, drug dealer in the woods. But, you just can't help but wonder why people aren't keeping a little bit better tabs on their kids in this town, or that kids old enough that to not have tabs on them don't have just a little bit of hesitation to go meet strangers in the dark and in the woods.
All right, listeners, if you've only watched these first 5 episodes, we're going to ask you to pause the podcast. Don't listen, because we're going to move into the spoiler section, the rewatch section. Only if you've seen the entire first season, all 10 episodes of Netflix's Dark. Continue on with us. Tiny, I've got to let you go. I'm sure I'll see you sometime in the past or future.
Sounds good, Bubba. Good luck, guys.
You've come to the deepest section of the Winden Caves, and join me for the spoiler section for episodes 3, 4, and 5. If you have spoilers you want discussed, write to us on Twitter and Instagram at PHQ, the word double, the single letter P, the letters HQ for headquarters, facebook.com/PHQ. Looking at these 3 episodes, the big thing staring us right in the face is Noah, the introduction of Noah. And even though I know you want to talk about it, I'm going to hold on the whole discussion of who is Noah until our next podcast, if that's okay. I'll talk about Noah in a bit, but I just want to talk about more general things. And one thing that the series mentions, I have to be honest, I can't remember if it's in these 3 episodes or the next couple, it mentions that there's no answer to which came first, the chicken or the egg. And that is going to prove to be so true in our understanding of the show. I want to look in this episode. We have Egon Tiedemann, the police chief, older police chief, who really seems to have a problem with the young Ulrich Nielsen. And young Ulrich Nielsen seems to have a big problem with Egon Tiedemann. If you've watched the whole season, and spoiler alert, once again, leave if you haven't watched all 10, this hatred, there's no beginning to it. There's no inciting incident. What do I mean by that? In 1953, Ulrich from the future is frustrated, he's crazy, and he's arrested by young Egon Tiedemann, the police officer. Because of how Ulrich was treated in 1986, he hates Egon. And of course, he displays that hatred in 1953. Because in 1953, Egon suffered from this deranged psycho who, for some reason, really reminds him of a kid he meets in 1986, Ulrich Nielsen, and he kind of takes that internal hatred and puts it out towards this poor kid. There is no beginning. There is no inciting incident. Both incidents happened and seemingly informed the other. The past affects the future, and the future affects the past. So great. There are going to be so many examples of that, and we're going to be talking about them in the next couple of spoiler sections we have on our next 2 podcasts. Besides Egon and Noah, there's yet another important character who's introduced in episode 3. That's newly elected nuclear power plant director. Boy, that's a tongue twister. Claudia Tiedemann, Egon's daughter and Regina's mother. She is clashing with her predecessor, Bubba Doppler, who informs her about the infamous secret barrels of, we assume, nuclear waste hidden in the nearby caves. Claudia is so interesting in that we never see her in 2019 until the very end, when she reveals herself to her grandson Bartosz, or as it seems like it's pronounced on the dubbing, Bartosz. Either way, we finally see her, the 2019 version of her, and it is such a far cry from the elegant, refined woman. These infamous barrels of nuclear waste. Claudia's going to do what I would call the wrong thing, in that she's going to seal them up in the caves and then have her future son-in-law, Alexander Tiedemann, weld the door shut. As much as we want to root for Claudia, because she seems to be on the good team with future Jonas in their fight against evil Noah's evil forces, we assume, it's hard to look back at her and see her panicking. Now, Bubba Doppler is telling her, listen, the whole town's future is in your hands, you got to take care of this. But still, after Chernobyl, you got to do stuff with nuclear waste correctly, Claudia. So I wonder if that influences any of our feelings about her. And she's still a big mystery. 2019 Claudia doesn't show up much. And what does she know? It's heavily implied, if not flat out stated, that Claudia Tiedemann has been to that infamous future, 2052, where our hero Jonas ends up at the end of the series. But okay, even though we're not going to delve in this podcast into Noah's identity, once again, we'll touch that in our next spoiler section on the next podcast. This show is so dense, if it's okay, I'm just going to start reading some notes from some of the various Wikipedia or dark wiki articles you'll find online. I want us all to be on the same page when we talk about possibly evil villain, Noah. So the first time we see Noah is in this batch of episodes, where in 1986, he's talking to Mikkel in the hospital. In the same episode, we see him in 2019. Obviously, he hasn't aged at all. Obviously, he is traveling through time, where he meets Bartosz, where Bartosz thinks he's meeting Eric Oppendorf's drug supplier. Is Noah Eric Oppendorf's drug supplier? Quite possibly. That'd be a good way to plant that phone into the bag so that Bartosz could find it. And it'd also be a good way to get Eric into your confidence for when you kidnap him, drag him to 1986, put him in your would-be time machine, and then kill him and dump his body back in 1953. Poor Eric. Poor Eric. In our previous podcast, spoiler section, I mentioned that Noah is also known by the name of Hanno Tauber. Now, where does Hanno Tauber come from? That's not really mentioned in these first 10 episodes. Where does it come from? Well, in some of the scenes, you're going to see a newspaper article which features Noah standing in front of the infamous church where Mikkel is buried. The dark Instagram account tweeted out an image of that article. In that article, the priest, aka Noah, is referred to as Hanno Tauber. Will we come to know that name? Will we get to know more? Will we get to know more of Noah's relationship with Agnes Nielsen and their son Tronte? Was Noah burning cigarettes on his son Tronte's arm? We will find out. If you can believe what Noah tells people like Helga and others, he is working towards a greater purpose, to elevate humanity by controlling time travel, where he could rearrange events that have already happened and escape the predetermined cycle of suffering. In some ways, that purpose sounds an awful lot like what future Jonas is trying to do at the end of the series. He's trying to break this loop, this never-ending loop. Now, Noah compares himself in his time-traveling torture chair to the biblical Noah and his ark. He believes he's the good guy, while on the opposite side is Claudia Tiedemann on the dark side. Could he be right? Well, he could be right, but if he's on the light side, he's got to develop more soft skills, more people skills. These terrible experiments to create a time machine which killed poor Eric and the deaf boy Yasin and Mads, Noah sees them as a loss for the greater good. Everybody who knows history and or the more recent Fantastic Beasts movies in the Harry Potter Wizarding World universe knows that when somebody says it's something for the greater good, know that they're on the wrong side. When he's talking to Mikkel, he expressed his belief in God as the creator of the universe, and that God has a plan for every human being. When Noah is scrubbing down the infamous bunker, he likes to do it shirtless to show off his awesome back tattoo, which is of course the emerald tablet, which Mikkel sees on a picture in the hospital, and Mikkel takes the picture off the wall. Who is Noah? According to that article, Noah was a pastor in the town of Vechta. He took his post in Winden at the age of 42. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy fans enjoy. It's unclear whether Hanno Tauber is his birth name. Let's be honest, it ain't his birth name. The final bit of 1953 Noah is when he's comforting Greta Doppler after her son Helge has disappeared. Helge, as we know at the end of the first season, ends up the little damaged boy who'd nearly been killed by Ulrich Nielsen. Helge ends up transported 33 years into the future into 1986. How does Helge get back and resume his life to be the middle-aged man we know he is in 1986? Obviously, Noah seems to be the missing piece in that. And you would assume we'll learn more about that, or not, in Season 2. It would be interesting to go back and do a timeline of how Noah and Helge started kidnapping the young children. I've tried researching it. If you find some better research, reach out to us on @PHQ. If I had to write my own timeline of how this went down, Noah helps the young boy, Helge, who's trapped in 1986, and transports him back to his time of 1953. There they build that bond to where by the point of 1986, Noah can convince Helge to help him with his experiments. I'm guessing that the first boy they kidnap is a boy from the time period they were both in, 1986, and that boy would be Mads Nielsen. They tried to put him in the time machine and get it to work. It didn't work. Mads dies. Mads' body is going to disappear, falling through a hole in time and appearing in 2019, but that's a different story. I would imagine the next boy they kidnap is Eric Oppendorf, but rather than kidnap another boy in 1986, where Egon is investigating, they say, hey, let's go into the future where nobody will know us or suspect us, so they go into the future and kidnap Eric. They bring Eric back to 1986. They try to do their time machine tactics on him. Eric dies. How do they get rid of the body? They transport him back to 1953. There's no way any of these deaths and disappearances can be connected to them because they live in 1986. Later, they kidnap the deaf boy Yasin. Sadly, it goes the same way. They transport his body back to 1953 and bury him together with Eric. Of course, Helge, who we're going to learn a lot more about in the next 3 episodes, ends up having a terrible accident in 1986 where his 2019 self tries to kill his 1986 self for doing all those terrible things. Sadly, the 2019 self seems to have suffered from dementia and loss of memory, and he can't realize that he's already been in this accident before. So Noah needs somebody new. Who does he go to? Well, he could be going to himself in Bartos. That's it for this week's spoiler section. My name's Bubba. You can reach me on Twitter @FitandTrim. That's FITTENTRIM, @FitandTrim on Twitter. Join us next time as we cover episodes 6, 7, and 8. Suddenly, Ulrich gets involved in the time travel fun. Until next time, I'll see you deep, deep, deep in the Winden Caves.